Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another live stream. It has been a little bit of time, about 3 weeks since the last stream, so thank you for bearing with me during this break. Sometimes life happens, and I try and do this kind of in my free time, so I appreciate y'all being supportive and let me take a little bit of time for myself. Um, let's see here. Today we've got two portfolios to go over and give some feedback on. I hope both of these folks could be here in the stream today. If not, totally understand. This first one was just kind of posted in the in our stream chat a few weeks ago. So I don't know if they're attending or not, or if they're even going to see this. But if you post it in the chat or something like that, and I see it, I'm definitely going to try and make sure I go over it and give it some feedback. So always feel free to share your portfolios with me, and I will do my best to make sure that we're going to cover them. So this one is from, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Yuandong Chen. So you drop this in the chat, and we're just going to go over this. So right off the bat, we've got this nice little animation up here. It's pretty cool. It's a nice, fun little animation. We've got some navigation up here, and then it looks like some blog posts. And then if we scroll down, there's sort of this comment section down here. So let's kind of talk about this. So immediately, like right off the bat, what strikes me is that there's nothing that like anchors the user and tells them what this page is all about. That it's your portfolio. So trying to incorporate just a little something up top that either incorporates your name or what this website is all about would really help the user orient themselves right off the bat. So maybe putting your name up front, maybe saying, "Hi, I'm Yuandong Chen, and this is my portfolio, and I'm a aspiring full stack developer," whatever you're trying to be. That would definitely be a little bit helpful to orient the user and help them understand what is going on. Next up, we have this navigation here, and when I first looked at this, I didn't realize that this was all separate content. There's not a lot of spacing in between them. There's not a lot of white space, and so at first glance, this looks more like a sentence than separate navigational components. So maybe we can try to separate these a little bit more. So if we grab this one and maybe bring it over here a little bit, and then we grab this link and bring it over here, all of a sudden, just adding a little bit of white space there already, it looks like three separate links instead of one just kind of smushed together sentence. And that's just kind of something to consider as you're maybe considering redesigning this a little bit more. Next up, we have, I assume, some blog posts, and I can tell because I'm looking at the URL, and but there's no affordance here that we're actually on the blog page. So maybe highlighting blogs in a different color, maybe adding a background or an underline, or maybe de-emphasizing these other two links relative to the blogs link would just kind of help us orient ourselves that, oh, we're looking at the blog content here. So that's just something to consider. Looking at these blog posts, there's no real affordance here that these are clickable. Like I kind of guessed and decided to click on one of them. And it looks pretty interesting, but there was nothing here kind of indicating to me that these were clickable. There's no button. There's no, even on hover, there's no like cursor. The mouse doesn't change or anything like that. So think about maybe adding a link here that says learn more or read on or read more, or just something to give the user a sense that these are interactive, that you can interact with these, that there's an affordance. That would be probably a little helpful. The other thing going on here, these are all kind of center aligned. Maybe consider left aligning it. That way it doesn't feel like so like unbalanced. Like one of this first one here is much longer than the rest of the content. And so left aligning it all the way to the end over here might just make it a little bit more consistent. And then what you could do, instead of having like all this white space over here, you could shorten the length of these boxes and just make it a little bit more centered on the page. So that would be helpful as well. With your date formatting here, so this is probably just outputted, I didn't mean to click on it, outputted by the database or something like that. Maybe consider using something like Moment.js to just do like a little bit of formatting. That way you can, it's a little bit more human readable. Like I know we can all kind of parse this and be like, okay, this is 2019 and this is January 5th, and that's great. But trying to parse this, you have to think about it, right? And so if we could just write it like January 5th, 2019, or even in a more traditional format with the year at the end, might be a little helpful as well, as we're kind of considering. And then the meta information here, I think is interesting. You've got a few typos in here, so just kind of make sure you're reviewing that as well. That could just be something to consider as you're going through here. And then we kind of have the search bar here. Maybe you could say consecutive. I'm not sure that's working. Maybe we say greater. Oh, there we go. So it's reshuffling them. That's what's going on here. So I don't know if you have enough posts to really warrant a search bar. Only 5 right here. If you're planning on adding a lot more, sure, I think that's great. But this might just be like a premature optimization. And then with these cards, oh, that's kind of cool. Actually, I think you're because you don't have tons of like meta information or like an introduction or something like that, you can probably get away with maybe having this sort of be the default and maybe not the grid like this. Although that interaction effect is kind of interesting. And this might just be like a nicer presentation of that information if you consider left aligning it, keeping things a little bit more condensed as well. Let's see here. Then we've got this comment section down here. I think comments would be great on each individual blog post. I think this is kind of universal across your entire website. That's not a common pattern that I've seen with portfolios in particular. So that could just be something to consider. Maybe you just want that on the portfolio pages as opposed to across your entire website as your footer. But again, that's a stylistic choice, so that can be up to you. If you are going to keep it, though, one thing I would suggest doing is maybe adding a div to it and making sure it has the same amount of margin on the sides as this other content, just so everything else seems a little bit more consistent. So that's kind of the upgrades I would think about there. But this looks like it's coming from a plugin, so I don't know if you can really customize this design or anything like that, so that would just be something to consider. Looking at like a project page, I think this all looks pretty nice. It's just we've got a lot of code in here. Some things, so I don't know if this is styling related or type related. We've got some indents here, and it's kind of, everything is not necessarily left aligned. So that would just be something to consider, just making sure this is all consistently left aligned here. And then with the state information, maybe moving that over to maybe the right hand side over here, and just focusing in on your text hierarchy, making sure that this section is a little bit larger as well, would also go a long way towards making this whole section a bit more readable. And then I notice like I'm clicking around and just like kind of accidentally clicking, and I keep exiting the blog post, which is okay. But maybe instead of like having the whole click event be on that whole area, consider maybe making like a close button or a back button or something like that, just to give the user a little bit of a sense of how to get back to those blog posts. Because I think right now you're on the blogs page, and there's like clicking that won't bring you back. So it took me a few seconds to figure out how am I supposed to get back, and I just accidentally clicked, and that was what did it for me. Now let's look at some projects here. So we've got the tele app for healthcare mobile. It's a little typo there. So this is pretty interesting. So we've got some technologies that you're highlighting. I like explaining the rationale. I think that's great for any work that you're doing, kind of explaining why did you end up doing this, and what you learned. I think that's a great reflection to be making, especially maybe as a younger developer. So that's definitely a great mindset to get into. And let's see here. Yeah, so we've got the comment section here. We kind of talked about that. We've kind of got the similar issue here with the alignment. So definitely consider either bringing this over here, making sure it's more like in line over here, or bringing this gap over and just making sure that this is all nice and aligned. I think we'll go a long way towards cleaning this up. And also we've got this, this header here, and we've also got the header over here, and maybe making sure that, it looks like those are clickable. Oh, I didn't even realize that. Oh, this looks really nice. So maybe bringing over, like having some more of an affordance here, like view, like a button that says view project or something like that, would be useful as well. And then maybe left aligning this over here would also help a little bit as well. For your text, try adding a little bit of line height and a little bit of separation here between your rationale and what you learned. I think that'll go a long way towards making this a little bit more readable. And actually, if we jump in our code here and go ahead and take a look, let's see. Line height 1.2. Yeah, and that's just 2.5 maybe. Just makes it a little bit easier for us to parse versus some of the other content down here. And then finally, maybe instead of if you're going to use bullets, it tends to be like vertically oriented. Here, you're still using bullets, but you kind of maybe use some flex to kind of put this in a row or something like that. So maybe this can be like a comma-separated list if you want to go horizontal with it. But if you want to go vertical, I think a bulleted list would work very well. Alrighty here. And then finally, we've got this About Me section. I love this book list. I think that's so cool when folks have spent the time and really have cataloged their reading over such a long period of time. That's super awesome. On your About Me section, I was looking for a little bit more about who you are as a person. I always think that's very nice in a portfolio site, just a little bit more personality here. It's coming through subtly with the iconography and the image here, but maybe just a little brief introduction to yourself. I think would be super helpful. And then we've got the download resume button, which is, again, super important. And nice that you're telling everybody that you're open for hiring. I think that's awesome as well. Let's see here. Definitely good affordance here. You're using your classic sort of link treatment here, so it definitely looks clickable. Again, though, consider left aligning this here. Just clean it up a little bit more. Same tip with the line height here. Definitely maybe adding a little bit of line height will make this look just a little bit more considered. And then your contact buttons down here, I think those look fairly affordable. Maybe making these like SVGs and having a little bit more of a hover effect would make them look even more clickable. But overall, I think you've got a lot of great content on the site. You've got a lot of good information. Just need a little bit of polish to take it to that next level. So I hope that was useful for you. And if you ever see this, I'm not sure if you're watching tonight or ever will, but definitely something to keep in mind to maybe take it to that next level. So thank you for sharing that with me. Oh, one other thing. I know you kind of have this on GitHub, but maybe updating your title of your page to not be React app and changing the file icon would also be helpful. And as you can see with our next portfolio, they've done that. So again, something that just adds a little bit more personality and consistency to your overall site. Alrighty. So next up, we have Matt Basile. And Matt is my brother, which is pretty awesome. So we're taking a look at his site, which is super fun. He's also a Lambda School student, so he definitely needs a portfolio as he's learning to become a full-stack engineer. So let's take a look here. We've got some navigation up top. We've got Matt Basile. We very clearly know whose site this is and kind of his unique value proposition here. What he's labeling himself as. So that's awesome. We've got a little bit of an affordance here that there's more content below. So maybe this could be even a little bit higher because right now it doesn't seem as center aligned as it could be. So let's see if we can tweak that a little bit. Bring this over here. We got F. Where's height? Yeah, maybe instead of 90, maybe something like that, just to increase that affordance a little bit more, make this a little bit more balanced. Could be a little bit more helpful. And then down here, we've got developer, content creator, and person. These are really nice hover effects, and I think the background color changing is nice as well. One thing that's kind of interesting is this overlap effect that's kind of happening. I don't know, that kind of throws me off a little bit, but again, that's a stylistic choice. Clicking at all these, you kind of, oh, this is nice. You can kind of get a little bit more details about yourself. I was thinking this might take you to a different page or something like that. Nice. Oop, I don't know if I'm freezing or if I've broken it. We're going to refresh. Oh, I bet what's happening is I have to click if you click the text in here, it's not going to do anything. You've got to click the card itself. And that's, again, you have to be careful with where what you're targeting with your JavaScript there. So that's just something to consider. I think this is nice. It has a lot of good information in here. Nice links to your content. These have link treatments, but it doesn't look like they are clickable. So that would just be kind of something to consider. Maybe not having the hover or adding some content in here. Because if you click on it, I think it just goes to that sort of hashtag, just to the top of the page, which might be a little misleading. Alrighty, then we got this project section here, which I think is pretty nice. It kind of looks like following sort of a similar pattern as before, as up here. So another thing to think about, so these kind of look clickable because there's not a lot of information, and or because when you hover on it, they sort of flex open like that. But there's nothing that really tells me that these are clickable. Like if I have my cursor over here and I didn't scroll them, it could just seem like three things that you're describing yourself as. Not the end of the world. Maybe consider adding a little bit more, maybe like a link that's like learn more, or like a little icon that's kind of like flip the card or something like that, just to make it seem like they can interact with it a little bit more. And animation is pretty fun though. I know that's not an easy animation, so that's definitely always good to see. I think these are very clear. You got the blue, so blue is always kind of associated with links and clicking, so that's very useful. Similar thing here, so it's not immediately, like it kind of is apparent because like, okay, guider selected, and then this information over here looks just kind of related because it's got the little bit of the similarity principle here at work. Gestalt principle, because they look similar, so therefore they might have the same affordance, but it's not immediately apparent. So maybe again, including like a learn more descriptor or tag, or even just like consider adding like a title attribute or a tooltip even, could be a way to signify that there's some more functionality here. I like these descriptions here, so definitely a lot of context, and I think having this like a little preview of the site is also really nice as well. So these all look good, and then of course talking about the tools used or technologies used is also a super nice way to emphasize the work you've done. Alrighty, now we have some articles here, and as we can see, we've got a lot of dog memes, which is always pretty fun. Let's see here. Okay, so this does have an underline, so it's a little bit more apparent that this is clickable, which I think is great. Maybe consider here left aligning all this information. I think it'll just help look a little bit more designed, a little bit more considered. Maybe trying to fix some of this bordering issues that are going on here. I know that that's always super hard to play with and make it look good, but maybe instead of using an image, you use a background image or something like that. But that's just an idea. Otherwise here, I think these tags, so these look really clickable. Up here, you kind of like signify that like this blue means click. And so when you click on them, it like, even though it's consistent with your color palette, the affordance is like, oh, I should be able to click on this and it should tell me something. And then nothing happens. So that would just be something to consider. Maybe changing the color palette a little bit more, adding another color in here or a different shade. Along with left aligning this, but I think your overall text hierarchy looks pretty good here. So I think that is going to be fine. And then finally, let's make something great together. I think this is nice. You've got your icons here. I don't know if GitHub is purple. Like, are they? I think they're this sort of color. It's kind of fun though to add a different color here and really draw attention to it. So that would just be something that kind of catches my eye. Oh, that's a nice animation there. Copyright all makes sense, so I think this is nice. One thing that I am noticing is it looks like your borders are a little different in different parts of your design here. I think it would be nice if they were a little bit more consistent. So these ones are different than these borders, which are, I think it's the same as these ones up here. So maybe just making these borders the same width as these ones up here, I think would go a long way towards making it helpful. Another thing would be nice, so right now only my cursor is changing here, so maybe having a hover effect, adding an underline to one of these buttons just to increase the affordance that these are clickable, I think would work really well. Let's see if get rid of this, actually leave that up. Let's see what the mobile styling looks like here. Yeah, so I think your navigation is well considered. Yeah, so like a hover effect that you have up here, I think would be very appropriate down below. All this information looks important. We want to have the hover on mobile, but that's just something to consider. This is nice. I think using some of that progressive enhancement, showing the images at a larger screen, but hiding them at the smaller screens, it's a fine approach here. And this looks like, this I think is looks a little bit more considered. Definitely make sure that you practice this on your touchscreen to make sure that your thumbs can hit this, that there is enough padding. But just kind of off the top of my head, this looks pretty good. And I like these cards. I think these cards look really nice. Honestly, these cards I think would look pretty good on desktop as well. So maybe instead of stretching them out, you could do 3 cards in a row. And that would be kind of consistent with what you're doing up here, so you can kind of almost have like a repeating pattern. Pros and cons to that, you might feel a little boring, but at the same time, that column of 3, you're adding some subtle consistency to your design as well. Awesome. So this looks pretty good. One thing that I'm kind of realizing is like I think I might want to see a little bit more about who you are as a person, because like there's a lot of content in here, but it's very hidden. Like if I don't click on these and I don't spend a second to read them, I miss it. So maybe at the bottom here, just having like a little bit more like about me, maybe your photo, who you are, and just like sort of a summary statement about what you're maybe looking for and what you're learning, what you're trying to do. That would be something to consider as well. And one other thing I just noticed is that these cards have a border radius, but everything else does not. Everything else is no border radius, and so that's a little inconsistent. So that would just be something to consider, making these consistent with the border radius that you've been using throughout the rest of your application, or your portfolio site, I should say. Awesome. So again, just a few things to kind of tweak, make a little better, kind of improve, and hopefully end up with the improved portfolio site. But anyway, so those were the portfolios that were submitted tonight. So thanks, Matt, and thanks Yuandong Chen for submitting those. It was super awesome to get a chance to look at them. As always, you're always welcome to submit your portfolios to me, and I'm happy to do a little feedback and kind of review them with you to help you take them to that next level. Hopefully back on the normal schedule. So on Saturday, we will be doing some more of my work on my portfolio, so kind of going through that process. Maybe even starting to get into the development side of things, which will be pretty fun and pretty interesting. So that is something to stay tuned for. But otherwise, thank you again for tuning in with me on your Wednesday night, and we will see you on Saturday or next week if you're coming back for some more portfolios. And before I forget, feel free to join the Discord. If you look below, you can see a link to it, and chat with us during the week when we're not streaming, or chat with us during the stream, and kind of get a sense of all about what we're doing. And we talk about code, we talk about portfolios, we talk about design, all sorts of topics that we can talk about, and maybe breaking into tech and landing that first tech job as well. So with that said, have a wonderful rest of your night, and we'll see you next week.